Hello, everybody. Welcome to Book Reviews with Patty. What it do, flight crew? FTC. Flight team, stand up. Today I will be reviewing The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald.
You just said F. Scott Fitzgerald. What did Scott Fitzgerald do to you?
Yeah.
No, that's his first name.
The book was published in 1925 and has sold over 25 million copies worldwide. It has also been made into a movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire. The novel is about a young man named Nick Carraway who moves to New York in the 1920s to pursue his life. He lives next to a man named Jay Gatsby who is larger than life and always throws massive parties. Now here's where it starts to get confusing. Gatsby is in love with Nick's cousin Daisy, who is married to Tom, and Tom has a mistress named Myrtle who's married to George. Nick eventually gets an invite to one of Gatsby's infamous parties, and he hits it off with him, and they become good friends. Gatsby and Daisy were in love 5 years ago, but then Gatsby had to go off to war, so he never saw Daisy. But then now Nick invites over Daisy and Gatsby, so they can see each other for the first time in 5 years. And he's worried that his what will actually happen won't live up to what Gatsby has expected and dreamed of over the last 5 years. But it goes pretty well, and they hit it off. Later on in the story, Nick and Gatsby go to lunch at Tom and Daisy's house, and during this time, Tom becomes aware that Daisy and Gatsby love each other. So then later that night, they go out into the city, and Tom confronts Gatsby, and he calls him out for being fraudulent and a bootlegger, and this angers Gatsby. But during this argument, Daisy moves closer to Tom, so showing that she trusts Tom more and feels more protected by him. And this shows Tom that he doesn't have to worry about Gatsby and or what he will do with Daisy, so he lets them drive home together. And then on the drive home, Daisy hits Myrtle, who, if you remember, was Tom's mistress, and she kills her. And so then Tom and Nick drive home, and they see this, and they see George, and George is extremely confused, and he believes that whoever killed Myrtle was her mistress, or her cheater, her lover. So then the next day, Wilson is searching for the car that killed Myrtle because he believes that's who her lover was. So he finds that it was Gatsby's car, and then he goes to Gatsby's house and shoots him and then kills himself. So that's kind of a shock ending that no one really expected to come. And then so at Gatsby's funeral, only a few people show up, just his dad and Nick, and then a few other people. But yeah, and then Nick kind of thinks about how Gatsby always believed that the great future was coming, and how everything that no matter what today happened, tomorrow will always be the future. Tomorrow will always be the perfect thing, that what we want, it will happen. Yeah, that's it. To be honest with you, I didn't like this book too much. I would give it a 3 out of 5 stars. The plot never really dragged me in, or I didn't feel connected with it. The characters were kind of stale and boring. They didn't really develop or change over the book. I mean, I guess Nick is the only one who really changed from the beginning to the end, but I mean, there wasn't, in the beginning, it was kind of slow to get introduced to everybody, and there wasn't a overlooking plot that really drove the characters. It was just kind of everyday life, and I get it because it's supposed to be a realistic fiction book, so there isn't a major conflict until the very end. But I just didn't feel, I wasn't interested by the middle parts of the book. There were just random small parts of information that just weren't compelling. I also felt that there were lots of smaller plot lines that weren't explained very well, and so it was just confusing to the reader to try to understand everything. So I just felt it could have been strung together better, and there could have been more conflicts and disagreements and scenes of action, instead of just people talking. But It's like realistic fiction, so it's based on like what actually would have happened. I mean, so it's not going to be like dragons and gangsters and mobsters every time, but I just wasn't very interested by it. Yeah. I did enjoy the ending of the book. I really like how the author just like in an instant killed Gatsby just like that. That like show it like the reader doesn't have any time to like think about what happened or like try to understand what's going on. That just all of a sudden Gatsby's just dead, and I like how like there wasn't any plot development or anything that like led to this. Like you would have never suspected that Gatsby like would be killed like in this fashion, and I like that like mystery and kind of like all of a sudden like he was gone. There was no like explanation really, and like no like closure, so it kind of like leaves the story open ended, and I like that. I think Fitzgerald could have done more with the plot instead of just like always making the conflicts and the plot about like the relationships between like Gatsby, Nick, and Daisy, and like Myrtle and George. I think he could have like maybe like added like a gangster scene with like Gatsby and like all his like underground crime and stuff, or like added a like separate antagonist that like everyone like unifies against, and like there's a big like action scene or something. I think that would have just like made the story more interesting instead of just like always following these like small plot lines. Like the reader could have like been like intrigued in the book, and like it would have better like I don't know, better like met like what people want to read, and like got them more invested, and like you like don't want to put the book down because like you're like, oh, what's gonna happen next. I think like if he like added like more characters or like a bigger like antagonist or like bigger conflict scene, I think like especially kids nowadays would have been like more intrigued. I know this was written in like 1925, but still like there's just not enough, it's not like fast enough, or there's not enough like action for like you to like stay invested and always like want to keep reading more. Like in chapter 4 we meet Wolfsheim, who's supposedly like a big like mobster. He like rigged the World Series and stuff, and I feel like the author could have just done so much more with this, right? And like Gatsby gets pulled over, but he whips out a card and he's like allowed to go free. So I feel like the author could have done so much more with like the mob scene and like everything like that to like suck in the reader and like get them more in the book. Like I feel like that would have been better for the story. Okay, now I'm going to read the final section of the book where Gatsby is shot. The chauffeur, he was one of Wolfsheim's protégés, had heard the shots. Afterward, he could only say he hadn't thought anything much about them. I drove from the station directly to Gatsby's house, and my rushing anxiously up the front steps was the first thing that alarmed anyone. But they knew then, I firmly believe. With scarcely a word said, 4 of us, the chauffeur, butler, gardener, and I, hurried down to the pool. There was a faint, barely perceptible movement of the water as the fresh flow from one end urged its way towards the drain at the other. With little ripples that were hardly the shadows of waves, the laden mattress moved irregularly down the pool. A small gust of wind that scarcely corrugated the surface was enough to disturb its accidental course with its accidental burden. The touch of a cluster of leaves revolved it slowly, tracing like the leg of a compass a thin red circle in the water. It was after we started with Gatsby towards the house that the gardener saw Wilson's body a little way off in the grass, and the Holocaust was complete. The reason I like this section of the book and I like how the author like tied everything together is because it just shocks you so much, and like he kind of like does it like he doesn't like do it like straight up. He kind of like shows it from like a different perspective, so like it's not like boom like right away, but like so you just like you kind of like figure it out like yourself, and then you just realize like, wait, did Gatsby actually just die? And then like you reread and you're like, oh wow, he's actually dead, because like the author like kind of like flies by it, and then but like once you figure it out you're just like shocked, because like you're like wait, did that actually like why did that just happen, like why aren't we hearing more about this? But like that's one of the main things I like about this book is like how he tied everything together, and like how he like ended everything off and like concluded everything. I also like how there's like no final scene with like Gatsby like taking his last breath or saying his last words, because that would just show like I don't know, that would just like explain more, but it's kind of like left like an open book, so like you can like think about like it however you want to, and like you can interpret it for yourself. Thanks for watching. Deuces.